The words hit me like a freight train, their impact sending shockwaves through my body. I froze, my hand still clutching the coffee mug, knuckles turning white. Massive fraud scandal, implicated Hughes. My ears rang as I strained to make out the hushed conversation between the two surgeons huddled nearby. Hughes. Garrett Hughes, my estranged husband. Fragments of their discussion pierced through the din of the crowded conference hall lobby. Criminal charges, federal investigation, millions lost. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperately wishing it were all a cruel misunderstanding. But deep down, a gnawing sense of truth clawed at my gut. Garrett had always been cavalier with ethics, bending rules to feed his insatiable ambition as a high-flying financial analyst. I'd turned a blind eye for too long, rationalizing his moral lapses as the cost of success, until they finally shattered our marriage beyond repair. My hands trembled as I gathered my things, the pieces slowly clicking into place. The constant business trips, the hushed phone calls, the blatant lies, they all reeked of guilt and deception now. As I hurried out, dodging clusters of colleagues, fury blazed within me. How could he? After everything, did he have no conscience? No thought for the consequences? For Elise? The thought of my 16-year-old daughter stopped me in my tracks. Sweet, innocent Elise, already grappling with the pressures of teenage life. This would devastate her. I clenched my fists, resolve steadying my nerves. Not this time, Garrett. I wouldn't let you inflict more pain on our family. My heels struck the pavement with newfound purpose as I stormed out of the hotel. I had to get to the bottom of this, for Elise's sake. And God help Garrett Hughes if the whispers proved true. I burst through the door of our upscale apartment, chest heaving. Garrett looked up from the sofa, his expression a portrait of nonchalance that I'd grown to despise. Lena, I didn't expect you back so. Cut the crap, Garrett, I snarled, thunder in my voice. What the hell have you done? His brows knitted in confusion. What are you talking about? The fraud scheme. I closed the distance between us, stabbing an accusatory finger into his chest. All those hushed meetings and shady dealings. I heard everything at the conference. His mask finally shattered, dread hollowing his eyes. Who told you? I recoiled, repulsed. So it's true? You lying, depraved bastard. Garrett's complexion turned ashen. Lena, please, let me explain. But I was done listening to his lies. Explain what? How you risked our lives, our daughter's future with your crooked greed? Drawing myself up, I met his pathetic gaze with steel. You're going to come clean, Garrett. To the authorities, to our daughter, to everyone. I won't let you put us through hell again. Jaw clenched, I turned on my heel and strode out, each step fortifying my resolve. The monster of deception I'd unknowingly married was unraveling, and this time I would be the one delivering justice. I stormed back into the apartment, slamming the door behind me. Garrett was slumped on the sofa, head in his hands. He looked up at the sound, eyes bloodshot. You're back, he croaked out. Don't act so surprised, I spat. Did you really think I'd just slink away after your despicable betrayal? Garrett rose warily. Lena, please, you have no idea what I've been going through. My hands balled into fists. Oh, I think I have a damn good idea, thanks to those whispers at the conference. I never meant to. He trailed off, rubbing his temples. Things just spiraled so quickly. My temper flared. You think that's an excuse? What for I'm going to say next? You got caught up in the thrill of deception? An uneasy silence stretched between us, thick with lingering resentment. Finally he spoke in a hoarse whisper. They're ruined, Lena. All my clients, my reputation. He met my glare with a haunted look. I'm facing financial oblivion and possibly criminal charges. In that moment, a part of me almost pitied him, the shadow of the confident, silver-tongued man I'd once loved, now reduced to this desperate husk. Almost. I stepped closer, voice dripping with venom. That's nowhere near the hell you've put our daughter and me through. Hurt flickered across his face, rapidly engulfed by shame. Good. He deserved to drown in it. My mind raced back to that night years ago, the fateful argument that shattered our marriage vows. Uncovered lies about money, infidelity, broken promises. I'd wept until I could cry no more. And through it all, Garrett remained coldly indifferent, consumed by greed and carnal desires. That night, I vowed our daughter Elise would never have to suffer the anguish I did over her father's moral failings. But now here I stood, the old wounds reopened and bleeding anew, White-hot rage roiled in my chest like lava. When were you planning to tell me, Garrett? Or Elise? I hissed through gritted teeth. He grimaced like a cornered rat. I don't know. I thought I could fix this before. My palm whipped across his cheek with a resounding crack. Garrett reeled back, stunned. Don't you dare invoke our daughter's name with your wretched lies, I snarled. Not after you jeopardized everything we have, everything I sacrificed my career for. I loomed over him, trembling with fury. She worships you, Garrett. How could you put her through such anguish again? Shame and guilt contorted his features, but I felt no sympathy, just disgust at his moral cowardice. He was the personification of every fear that kept me up at night, dreading the day his deceit resurfaced to torment our little girl. Suddenly, Garrett seemed to crumple under my withering glare. I watched him passively as he sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, shoulders heaving. I stood rooted for a long moment, then turned and strode out without a backwards glance. The first tears streamed down my cheeks as the magnitude of his latest betrayal hit home. I would protect Elise, no matter what inner demons I had to confront from our shattered past. I found Elise hunched over her laptop at the kitchen counter, fingers furiously tapping away. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she navigated the storm of teenage life. "Hi, honey," I said gently, not wanting to startle her. "Everything okay?" Elise looked up with a weary smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, Mom. Yeah, just working on this stupid group project." I winced inwardly at her haggard expression, the telltale signs of adolescent stress etched into her young features. If only I could shield her from such burdens. Fighting the urge to pull her into a warm embrace, I gestured to the laptop screen. "What's the project about?" "Environmental science," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "We're analyzing the ecological impacts of commercial farming, but my partners keep blowing off meetings and missing deadlines." My heart ached to see her so overwhelmed. Elise had always been a diligent student, meticulously completing assignments well before they were due. But these past few months, the workload seemed to be taking a heavy toll. "I'm so sorry, Elle. That's really unfair to you." She shrugged listlessly. "It's whatever. I'm used to carrying the load at this point." Those words cut deep, a brutal reminder that once again I'd failed to protect her from unnecessary hardship. Just like that night years ago when she overheard Garrett and I screaming at each other. Swallowing hard, I forced a reassuring smile. "Why don't you take a break? We could watch a movie. Just the two of us." Elise hesitated, chewing her lip in that adorably pensive way she had since childhood. Finally, she spoke in a small voice that shattered my heart anew. Have you noticed people have been treating me differently lately?" My breath caught in my throat as she continued. "It's like they go out of their way to exclude me, whispering behind my back." She hugged her arms, suddenly looking so small and vulnerable. Did I do something wrong, Mom?" White-hot anger flared within me, aimed directly at the monstrous coward who'd brought such misery into our lives. I wanted nothing more than to rush over and enfold Elise in my arms, shielding her from this fresh betrayal. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Couldn't risk tainting her innocence before I fully grasped the serpentine depths of her father's transgressions. Suppressing my rage, I crossed over and placed my hands on her slender shoulders. "Listen to me, Elise," I said firmly. "You are the most kind-hearted, brilliant young woman I know, and anyone who treats you with anything less than respect doesn't deserve a second of your time or energy." She gazed up at me with those soulful eyes, silently pleading for reassurance and guidance. In that moment, I yearned to lay bare the sordid truth haunting our family once more. But I held my tongue, forcing a warm smile instead. "Trust me, honey, you haven't done anything wrong. Those people are just small-minded and intimidated by your spirit." I gently brushed a tendril of hair from her face. Bullies always lash out at the strong, the special ones who shine too brightly. Slowly, the tension drained from Elise's posture, her eyes regaining a spark of their familiar radiant self. "Thanks, Mom," she murmured, managing a small smile. I really needed to hear that." As she turned back to her work, I could no longer suppress the storm of conflicted emotions roiling within. Garrett would be made to answer for every one of Elise's tears, every shred of hardship he'd callously inflicted. My titanic quest for justice had only just begun. The next morning, I strode into my office at Mercy General with a renewed sense of purpose burning in my chest. I had to get to the bottom of Garrett's tangled web before it collapsed on our family. Sinking into my desk chair, I pulled up his name on my computer, grimly scanning the search results. Article after damning article detailed a shocking saga of fraud, deception, and shattered lives. Multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme, offshore accounts, disgraced hedge fund manager. My stomach twisted as I read about investors and retirees left destitute, life savings siphoned away by Garrett's unquenchable greed. How could he have been so heartlessly reckless, so morally bankrupt? One particularly lurid piece caught my eye. An exposé from a local paper written by a journalist named Alexis Harmon. I vaguely recalled her as an up-and-coming reporter known for her uncompromising pursuit of the truth. Perhaps she could help unravel this sordid tangle. I quickly jotted down her contact details, resolving to reach out shortly. But first, one other avenue required exploring. I leaned back, worrying my lower lip as I typed out a familiar name, Malcolm Brooks. One of Garrett's closest colleagues during his heyday on Wall Street, Brooks had been disgraced a few years back in an insider trading scandal. He and Garrett had been thick as thieves until Brooks landed in prison while Garrett escaped culpability through dumb luck and clever maneuvering. If anyone had insight into the depravity Garrett was capable of, it was Malcolm. A short while later, my phone buzzed with a New York area code. Taking a steadying breath, I accepted the call. Malcolm Brooks speaking. Mr. Brooks, I said evenly. This is Lena Barkley, Garrett Hughes' wife. A momentary silence crackled over the line before he responded, surprise tinging his gruff tone. Well, isn't this a blast from the past? To what do I owe the pleasure, Mrs. Barkley? I paused, weighing my words carefully. I think you know exactly why I'm calling. Another beat of silence before a low, bitter chuckle. So you finally caught a glimpse of that worm's true colors, did you? Can't say I'm surprised. Garrett Hughes was always 2 shakes away from an ethical freefall. My breath caught in my throat at his venom-laced words, the pieces falling into sickening clarity. All those years ago, beneath my willful ignorance, I must have sensed Garrett's capacity for such monumental betrayal. That's what poisoned our relationship, our family, from the very start. I swallowed hard against the lump of guilt burning in my throat. Mr. Brooks, I need your help to undo the damage he's caused, for my daughter's sake. Walk me through everything you know. He made a low, scoffing noise. Of course, wouldn't want little Garrett Jr. growing up with Daddy's stench all over her. His cruel words lanced straight through me like jagged shards of ice, but I gritted my teeth, forcing my voice to remain steady. Please, Malcolm, I understand if you hate Garrett, but don't take that out on my child. She's completely innocent in all this. A tense pause stretched between us before he finally sighed, relenting. You're right. I apologize, Ty. That was uncalled for. I leaned forward, clutching the phone tightly. So you'll help me bring him down before anyone else gets hurt? Another weighted pause before he muttered. Yeah, I'll help you burn that snake straight to the ground. Spine ramrod straight, I listened with cold determination as Malcolm laid bare the full, sickening scope of Garrett's depravity. Breached ethics, illegal trades, hollowed out companies, and ruined lives littering his path like grisly roadkill. A white-hot mixture of rage, disgust, and bone-deep determination blazed within me by the time he finished. Garrett had hurt so many people, stolen their futures and sense of security through cold, calculated avarice. But I would be damned if he stole those things from Elise and me again. No more lies, no more running, no more hollow excuses. The time for my husband's reckoning had finally come. And I would be standing watch, clear-eyed and uncompromising when the hammer fell. You can't be serious, Mom. Elise gaped at me, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and hurt. I steeled myself, fighting to keep my expression neutral. I'm afraid I am, honey. I reached across the kitchen table, gently grasping her hand. This is the only way to stop your father from inflicting more damage. She yanked her hand back, shaking her head vehemently. But going public like that? Dragging his name through the mud? He did this to himself, Elise. I fought to keep my voice steady against the growing tide of anguish welling within me. Your father's greed and selfishness put us in this position, not me. Elise shot up from her chair, whirling away with her arms hugged tightly across her chest, the universal gesture of wounded vulnerability. You always saw the worst in him, even when he was trying his best. Maybe that's why he felt like he couldn't come to us. The accusations sliced deep, dredging up years of unresolved guilt over the disintegration of our family unit. My fists clenched at my sides as I struggled against the urge to snap back in volatile defensiveness. This wasn't about me and Garrett. It was about protecting our daughter from being collateral damage in his crusade of lies. Drawing a steadying breath, I rose and crossed over to where she stood, trembling with her back towards me. "Elise, look at me." I pitched my voice in that soft maternal tone that never failed to soothe her troubles as a child. "You need to understand how dangerously far your father has gone this time." Slowly, achingly, she turned to face me, eyes glistening, lip quivering in a valiant struggle to maintain her composure. "All those people he's hurt, the lives he's ruined." I fought against the lump swelling in my own throat. "If I don't stop him now, we could lose everything. Our home, your college fund, my practice, everything we've worked so hard to build." A lone teardrop traced down Elise's porcelain cheek as the gravity of my words sank in. Wordlessly, I pulled her into a fierce embrace, cradling her head against my chest while she shuddered with muffled sobs. We stayed like that for countless moments, mother and daughter united against the maelstrom threatening to rip our family asunder once more. At last, Elise drew back, sniffling as she swiped at her damp cheeks. Her eyes still shone with unspeakable hurt, but now reflected a glimmer of dawning resolution. "Okay," she said in a small but steady voice. "If this is the only way to make Dad face the truth, I'm in." A fragile sense of hope bloomed in my chest, quickly tempered by lingering dread. "I wish there was another way, Elise. Truly I do. But your father crossed a line this time that can't be ignored or undone." Marshalling my own inner reserves of courage, I drew myself up to my full height. "We're going to work closely with my contacts, a tenacious reporter and one of your father's most embittered former colleagues. Together, we're going to systematically unravel and expose every sordid thread of his fraud to the public." Elise's expression hardened with grim determination, aging her well beyond her 16 years. "Then let's get to work on bringing Dad's crimes to light," she said in a steely tone that would have made me proud under any other circumstances. "No more lies. No more protecting the Garrett Hughes everyone thinks they know." She extended her hand in a symbolic gesture of familial solidarity. It's time he faced the consequences for who he really is. Our eyes locked, two affronted warriors bound by unbreakable blood and shared betrayal, vowing to settle an overdue personal reckoning. Squaring my shoulders, I grasped her hand in an unbreakable filial vice. Agreed. It's finally time for the world to meet the real Garrett Hughes. And on that fateful day, the wheels of my husband's inevitable downfall were finally set into irreversible motion. The rhythmic tapping of my foot matched the pounding of my pulse as I sat tensely watching the clock. Any minute now, Alexis Harmon's blistering expose on Garrett's crimes would go live on the Hartford Chronicle's website. Elise shifted next to me on the sofa, her own restless energy bleeding through. A myriad of emotions flickered across her face: anger, sadness, trepidation. My heart ached to see the loss of her youthful innocence playing out so vividly. Squeezing her hand, I gave what I hoped was a reassuring smile. "It's going to be okay, honey?" She managed a wan nod, lips pressed into a grim line. Her phone buzzed, and she quickly silenced it, no doubt responding to yet another concerned message from a friend who'd inevitably seen the firestorm brewing on social media. Suddenly, my own phone rang, the call I'd been bracing for. Drawing a fortifying breath, I accepted and brought it to my ear. "It's done." Alexis Harmon's crisp voice sounded tinny but resolute. "The article just went live, complete with that paper trail from your source detailing every sordid dime Garrett pocketed illegally over the years." "Thank you, Alexis," I said, squeezing Elise's hand tighter. "You have no idea how much this means to us." "Don't thank me yet," she replied grimly. "This is just the opening salvo. Brace yourselves. Garrett's world is about to go nuclear." No sooner had she spoken than my laptop pinged with a new email notification. The subject line alone was enough to drain my face of all remaining color. Disgraced money manager Garrett Hughes orchestrated a $120 million Ponzi scheme. I drew a shuddering breath as the damning article's contents filled the screen. A masterfully crafted tapestry of cold, irrefutable facts meticulously unraveling my husband's litany of securities fraud, embezzlement, and brazen deception. Elise peered over, hand flying to muffle a horrified gasp as she digested the sheer enormity of Garrett's treachery. Of how his unchecked avarice had defrauded innocent pensioners of their life savings and irreparably shattered the finances of countless households, all while he lived in unrepentant opulence, utterly devoid of conscience. "Oh, my God," she choked out, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. "All those people, how could he?" My own grief and revulsion warred with a perverse sense of grim vindication. For far too long, Garrett's fortress of lies had tainted and contaminated those he claimed to love most. Now, at long last, the floodgates had finally burst open, a searing light shining upon the bottomless pit of deceit and moral bankruptcy he'd chosen to wallow in. Clutching my daughter's trembling form, I could only watch numbly as the first furious reactions began rolling in. Outraged tweets and Facebook rants from defrauded victims and scandalized observers alike. One particularly visceral comment seared itself into my memory. "Garrett Hughes is a vile, avaricious monster who deserves to rot in jail for the rest of his miserable life." Far from objecting, I found myself silently agreeing. How could I not, after laying my eyes upon the full, grotesque tapestry of my husband's perfidy? The shattered futures, ruined families, and trail of lives callously discarded in his rapacious wake. For so long, I deluded myself into believing I could redeem the shadowed remnants of the man I once loved. That faint glimmers of decency still resided within Garrett's withered soul. But confronted with such nightmarish evidence of his depravity, I realized I'd been clinging to a fantasy, a desperate mirage of the husband and father he should have been. The truth was more brutal, more horrifically absolute. Garrett Hughes was a pathological con man without a shred of empathy or remorse, and he needed to be stopped before his poison seeped into any more innocent lives. The reckoning was nigh. As the first bombshell detonated across the mediascape, I could only steel my resolve for the seismic upheavals still to come. No more turning away, no more deluding myself about second chances, only hard truths and the personal justice I'd fought so hard to deliver. The pounding on the front door echoed through the apartment like a judge's gavel. Elise and I exchanged a loaded glance, her eyes still rimmed with red from the night's endless tears. "Stay here," I murmured, rising to my feet on legs that trembled ever so slightly. With a fortifying breath, I crossed over and pulled open the door. Two grim-faced U.S. Marshals stood on the other side, badges glinting in the dim hallway light. "Mrs. Lena Barkley?" the taller one asked in a flat, no-nonsense tone. I lifted my chin, anger and vindication warring within me. "That's me. I assume you're here about my husband, Garrett Hughes?" "We have a federal warrant for his arrest," the second marshal stated, brandishing a sheaf of papers. "Our sources indicate he was last seen at this residence. Where is he?" An icy chill lanced through me, not of fear, but of sheer disgust that Garrett would potentially use our home as a refuge after his sickening criminal acts were laid bare. Grinding my teeth, I jerked my head towards the hallway. "See for yourselves." The two men brushed past me, fanning out with practiced efficiency. One whistled sharply as they entered the living area, his partner quickly taking up a defensive stance. Target sighted. I followed their gaze to the corner of the room, and felt a swell of revulsion crest within me. There sat the disgraced shadow of my husband, slumped against the wall in his silk bathrobe and stained undershirt, an open bottle of gin clutched in his trembling hands. Garrett squinted blearily up at the approaching marshals, a pathetic, disheveled mockery of the suave, confident operator he'd once fancied himself. As they hauled him to his feet, the unmistakable reek of sour booze and failure assaulted my nostrils. "Garrett William Hughes," the first marshal barked, slapping cuffs around his limp wrists. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and grand larceny charges. You have the right to remain silent." Elise emerged from the hallway, eyes blazing with equal parts loathing and raw hurt as she took in her fallen father's pathetic state. "Mom," she whispered from the corner of her mouth, sounding almost childlike. "Was this really necessary, parading him out like some common criminal?" Another wave of anger swelled in my breast. this one tinged with protectiveness over my daughter's lingering innocence. With 3 long strides, I crossed over to stand mere inches from Garrett's sagging, swaying form. "Look at her," I spat, jabbing a finger towards Elise's stricken face. "Look at the anguish you've put this beautiful girl through, you selfish bastard." His head lolled up, bloodshot eyes struggling to focus on our enraged features. "Lilina? Elise? I?" "Save it, Garrett," I snarled, revolted by his meager attempt at drunken contrition. "We don't want to hear any more of your lies." Elise stepped forward then, every ounce of her petite frame radiating white-hot fury. "Do you have any idea how many people's lives you destroyed, all for a bigger penthouse and sports cars?" Her voice dripped with caustic venom. "You're a pathetically greedy, soulless husk of a human being." Garrett recoiled as if struck, the haze of inebriation doing nothing to mask the spasm of naked shame contorting his features. But it wasn't remotely enough to temper the flames of disgust consuming me from the inside out. "You're right, Elise," I seethed, unable to tear my disgusted glare from his slack, pitiful visage. "He doesn't deserve a single ounce more of our anguish or tears." Straightening my spine, I fixed him with eyes of purest ice. "Take him away, officers, and if I never have to lay eyes on this wretched, morally bankrupt husk again, it'll be too soon." Yet as the marshals wrestled the handcuffed Garrett towards the door, our splintered family's legacy of generational trauma festered in the air between us, like an open wound. Gathering Elise into a protective embrace, I watched with a heady swirl of sadness, rage, and grim resolve as my husband was hauled away towards the harsh judgment he'd so ruthlessly courted. There would be no more lies, no more hollow platitudes, or desperate 11th-hour appeals for forgiveness. Only the cold and bitter fruit born of his voracious avarice. As the door swung shut behind Garrett Hughes, severing him from our lives forever, a solitary thought echoed through my mind. Justice, long overdue, had finally been served. 6 months later. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, bathing the room in a warm, rejuvenating glow. I sipped my coffee, savoring the rich aroma and tranquil silence. So much had changed, yet it felt like lifting a crushing weight from my shoulders. The financial fallout from Garrett's crimes had been severe. Between the court-ordered restitutions and legal fees, our prosperous lifestyle quickly became a memory. But I didn't lament its passing, not when I finally felt liberated from his toxic legacy. Elise's footsteps padded into the kitchen, shattering the fragile quiet. Her eyes were puffy from another night of processing the seismic shifts in our lives. But a small, peaceful smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Morning, Mom." I returned the smile, chest swelling with maternal pride. "Good morning, sweetheart." Gesturing to the stack of college brochures scattered across the table, I arched an eyebrow. "Anything catching your eye?" Elise sank into the chair opposite me, worrying her lower lip in that familiar pensive way. "A few possibilities. The scholarship money definitely helps expand my options." My heart clenched, guilt rapidly dousing the warm glow. If not for Garrett's catastrophic greed, Elise's application process wouldn't be weighed down by such pragmatism. "Honey, I'm so sorry you even have to worry about." "Stop," she cut me off firmly, that fierce spark shining through once more. "What's done is done, remember? We're not going to keep torturing ourselves over Dad's mistakes." I blinked, caught off guard by her adamant maturity. When had my little girl grown into such a resilient, self-possessed young woman? Reaching across the table, I gave her hand an affectionate squeeze. "You're right. We've finally exorcised that demon from our lives. No more looking back." Elise squeezed back, her warm smile broadening. "Exactly. We've got a fresh start ahead. Just you and me, Mom. Like it's always been." My breath hitched at the swell of emotions rushing through me. She was right. Through all the tumult and betrayal, our bond had remained unbreakable, an indomitable constant. No matter how deeply Garrett's deceit had burrowed, he could never extinguish the profound, unconditional love between a mother and her daughter. Nodding fiercely, I blinked back nascent tears of gratitude and release. "You and me against the world, kiddo. Always and forever." Elise's radiant smile was all the assurance I needed that we'd persevere, stronger, wiser, and steeled against any future maelstroms life might hurl our way. Because that unshakable foundation of love and trust was one pillar Garrett Hughes could never hope to crumble, no matter how greedily he indulged his worst impulses. With a contented sigh, I rose and began gathering our dishes, basking in the tender domestic ritual. The path ahead was rife with challenges, to be sure, but also brimming with possibilities neither of us could scarcely imagine yet. One thing was certain: the shackles of lies and moral cowardice had finally been shattered. Elise and I were free to author our own story on our own unbending terms. A sudden notification from my laptop caught my eye. I moved over and felt my eyebrows climb as the latest breaking news headline flashed across the screen. Disgraced money manager Garrett Hughes sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for orchestrating $120 million Ponzi scheme. A heaviness seemed to lift from my very soul as the words sank in. At long last, the ultimate cosmic arbitration had been delivered. Garrett's insidious misdeeds would no longer corrupt and metastasize in the shadows. He alone would answer for the countless lives he'd callously upended in pursuit of ill-gotten fortunes. Poetic justice, whether he was spiritually capable of appreciating it or not. Elise peered over my shoulder at the screen, her unburdened expression hardening into one of cool stoicism. Without a word, she reached past me and emphatically closed the laptop, shutting out her father's sins like a swiftly banished ghost. Our eyes met, shining with mutual catharsis. Betrayal and trauma had bent but not broken us. If anything, the lacerating trials had galvanized our resilience into an indestructible foundation to build anew. As a fresh wave of morning sunlight washed over us, I made a silent vow to ensure the remaining years of Elise's childhood would be swaddled in unconditional warmth, wisdom, and renewed family bonds. Crossing the space between us, I pulled my daughter into a fierce, lingering embrace. When we at last parted, our faces reflected brilliant mirrors of steadfast love and hope for the future shimmering just over the horizon. For while Garrett Hughes's karmic path ended in a prison cell, ours continued to hell. Ever onward, uplifting, inspiring, and blazing towards brilliant new horizons of our own authoring.